Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, well, we're doing something a bit grim, maybe, but definitely necessary for understanding this world.
Yeah, thought experiment.
We're putting ourselves, and you listening, smack dab in the middle of the ultimate bad day.
Right into it.
We're not talking, theoretical stuff. This is thermonuclear reality, seen through the lens of, well, probably the most famous apocalypse out there.
Yeah.
The Fallout universe.
That's the plan. And our core idea for this whole series, it's pretty brutal, honestly. It's based on the game lore, sure, but also the real-world physics the designers kind of leaned on to build that atmosphere. You know, the Capital Wasteland, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, all ruins.
So the big question is, how long would you actually last? If we drop you in this second the Great War kicks off, what makes someone survive when everything else just turns to, well, dust?
Knowledge, mostly. Knowing what hits you and when.
Exactly, and we're going to break this down like moment by moment. We've pulled together sources on the war's background, the actual science behind those, frankly, terrifying weapons.
Arbitrarily scalable is the term, yeah. Scary stuff.
The real physics of radiation decay, and even the old civil defense plans that existed before everything went sideways. So this first part one, the mission is, let's say, simple. Survive the opening act.
If you can call it simple.
Right. The blast itself, the firestorm that follows, and maybe the most critical bit, those first 60 minutes dealing with radiation.
Yeah, that first hour is crucial.
We're looking at your chances, basically, your likelihood of just making it out of ground zero alive, based purely on what you know and what you might have prepared.
And the stakes are, well, total. We're talking the complete and utter collapse of civilization. October 23rd, 2077.
Yeah.
Game over.
It wasn't just like a couple of bombs traded either, was it?
No, this was the big one. The total thermonuclear end of the Sino-American War. Just everything unleashed.
So to survive even that first moment, you got to understand the weapons, the war that birthed them, and the physics of that invisible killer, the radiation.
Absolutely. Context is everything here.
Okay, so before the sirens and the flashes, before the mushroom clouds, we need to get why. Why did the world end up on this cliff edge?
Right. It wasn't sudden. Not really.
This wasn't just Tuesday and then boom.
No. The groundwork for the Great War, it was laid over decades. Years of just increasing desperation. People call it the resource wars, right? Stretching from, 2052 all the way to 77?
An unbelievable story of scarcity driving violence.
It really was. The whole global economy just seized up resources, especially oil, fossil fuels. They got so scarce that countries basically threw out the rule book.
Morality, diplomacy, gone.
Completely. Just pure desperation. And that fueled atrocities, Nations started using nukes, bioweapons, chemical stuff, not just on enemies, but sometimes on their own people.
Their own people. Seriously.
Yeah, to crush riots, secure assets, whatever it took.
And the sources we looked at, they paint this picture of the U.S. and China, the big players. Yeah. They ended up looking almost identical, didn't they?
Structurally, morally, yeah. Mirror images. Both just spiraled into these paranoid, resource-hoarding, totalitarian states.
Fighting over basically nothing by the end because they'd already wrecked the prize.
Exactly. Look at the examples, right? The oil crisis got so bad, the U.S. military actually invaded Mexico.
Just to keep the refineries going.
Just to keep the gas flowing north. Caused huge chaos down there, obviously. And meanwhile, you had Europe and the Middle East. Same story. Fighting over the last drops of oil.
Until there was nothing left to fight over.
Right. The sources literally say the oil fields in the Middle East run dry, and suddenly there was no longer a goal in the conflict. It just stopped because the prize vanished.
An apocalypse that started with an economic whimper.
And ended with a physical bang. A very, very big bang.
And the U.S. war effort, like in Alaska against China, that was just fueled by cannibalizing its neighbors, right?
But totally. They drained Canada, clear-cut huge forests for timber.
Which understandably led to resistance, sabotage.
Yeah, against the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline, critical infrastructure, and the U.S. response.
Just annex the whole country.
Starting in 2072, they literally consumed their allies, their neighbors, all to fight this trench war in Alaska that was basically pointless because the resources were already gone.
Jesus, okay, so that level of desperation.
Yeah.
It leads us to the tools, the hardware, the weapons that actually ended it all. And these weren't your grandfather's A-bombs, not Hiroshima stuff.
No way. We're talking arbitrarily scalable thermonuclear hell. That's the key phrase. Arbitrarily scalable.
Let's break down that yield difference, because this is where you see why the Great War was, well, great in the worst way. Starts with fission, right? The simple A-bomb.
Right, the fission bomb, the A-bomb. splits heavy atoms, uranium, plutonium. The analogy you mentioned before, the jar, it kind of fits.
Yeah, explain the jar. Why couldn't they just make, like, a massive 50 megaton A-bomb? What's the limit?
It's called the criticality limit. Basically, if you pack too much of that fissile stuff, plutonium, say, together before you set it off, you risk it going off early. A pre-detonation, it starts to fission a little bit on its own, heats up, and just blows itself apart before the main explosives can fully crush it.
So it fizzles like pouring water too fast into that jar. It spills before it's full.
Exactly. You don't get the full bang for your buck. And that limits pure fission bombs, usually to the, low kiloton range. Not small, but limited.
Okay, fission bomb, glass jar, hard limit. But the Great War used H bombs, fusion bombs. So if fission's the jar, fusion is the river. You can make it as big as you want.
That's pretty much the idea behind the Teller-Ulam design, which is like the basis for almost all modern nukes. It's a two-stage weapon, thermonuclear.
2 stages. Stage 1.
Stage 1 is a small fission bomb, the primary, maybe just a few kilotons. When that goes off, it unleashes this insane burst of X-rays and gamma rays, just blindingly intense.
Okay, and where do those X-rays go? They don't just disappear.
No, they get focused inside what's called a radiation case, or a hole around.
Yeah.
Think of it like a shell separating the primary from the second stage, the fusion fuel.
Yeah.
The X-rays hit the inside lining of that case, vaporize it instantly, and that creates this unbelievable internal pressure.
Like a giant piston crushing inwards.
Exactly. Crushing and heating the fusion fuel, usually something like lithium deuteride in that secondary stage.
And that's what triggers the fusion reaction, the really big one.
That's the exponential leap in power. A nuke triggering a much, much bigger nuke.
Okay, now here's the really nasty part for our survivor in the capital wasteland. The dirtiness factor you mentioned.
Right. So to squeeze every last bit of yield out of these things, maybe half of the total power often comes from the final step.
It is.
A jacket or tamper around the fusion stage made of depleted uranium, regular non-enriched uranium.
Okay.
When the fusion part goes off, the pressure and heat are so immense it forces that uranium jacket to undergo fission too. Fast fission.
Ah, so even more splitting atoms at the very end.
Loads more. And that final fission stage creates a truly staggering amount of fission products, which is just a fancy way of saying,
Fallout.
yeah,
Really radioactive fallout.
the worst kind.
Yeah.
Long-lasting, intensely radioactive stuff.
Okay, hold on. You mentioned the Soviets built that monster, the Tsar Bomba. 50 megatons. Like 1,500 times Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. Was that thing just unbelievably dirty then?
See, that's the exception that proves the rule. And it's a great comparison. The Tsar Bomba, its original design, was actually for 100 megatons.
Double.
Yeah. But the Soviet scientists, they were genuinely worried about the fallout contaminating their own territory.
Makes sense.
So they made a specific change. They swapped out that final uranium tamper,
For what?
lead.
Lead doesn't fission.
Bingo! So no final fission stage, which meant that like 97% of the Tsar Bomba's massive yield came from fusion alone, which is relatively clean.
So, paradoxically, the biggest bomb ever was one of the cleanest.
In terms of fallout per megaton, yeah, one of the cleanest super bombs.
Which tells you something, right?
It tells me the bombs used in the Great War probably weren't the clean version.
Almost certainly not. The fact that the war happened despite the costs, it suggests the bombs raining on DC were the default setting. Dirty, uranium jacketed, scalable fusion monsters designed for maximum kill, maximum destruction, and maximum long-term radiation.
The worst of all worlds. High yield, scalable, and super dirty.
Pretty much.
Which brings us to preparation. Or maybe the lack of it. The U.S. government supposedly saw this coming, right? Project Safe House.
Project Safe House, yeah. Kicked off around 2054, it was the government trying to figure out civilian protection on a huge scale, driven partly by those earlier nuke exchanges in the Middle East and also the new plague bioscare.
And the big plan was vaults. Lots of vaults.
Build super fast by Vault-Tec, that was the idea.
And how did that go? Knowing fallout.
Flawed is putting it mildly. Our sources mention it was financed with, like, junk bonds, high-risk stuff, riddled with fraud, cutting corners, mismanagement.
Of course it was.
And that's before you even get into the whole, social experiment aspect of the vaults.
Right, so the government poured money into these big, centralized solutions.
That largely failed the average person, yeah.
And the lesson there for our survivor.
The big national plan, it collapsed. If you look at the descriptions of the capital wasteland, it mentions small communities. They survived the bombs initially, but then they just flared up only to be extinguished by the uncaring wasteland.
Meaning the big safety net wasn't there.
Gone. Individual survival came down to pure physics, local shelter, and luck. The people caught in that moment, they were utterly on their own.
Okay. Context set. Weapons are apocalypse grade. Now, the physics. The first few seconds, we're standing near, let's say, the Corvega factory, big industrial building near DC. The bombs start hitting downtown, maybe a few miles off. What happens first? Millisecond one.
Right, the sequence. You got to get the sequence because speed is critical here. And it's kind of backwards from what you might think.
Okay.
First thing that hits you is the thermal flash, blinding light, plus incredibly powerful gamma rays and X-rays. Deep penetration stuff.
Traveling at light speed. Instantaneous, basically.
Pretty much. Then, a moment later, comes the slower part. The blast wave.
The physical shock wave. The hurricane wind.
The wall of compressed air. Infinitely destructive, but it takes time to travel. Light first, then boom.
Okay, that timing. Let's talk zones. If a big multi-megaton bomb hits downtown DC, what are the rings of destruction spreading outwards?
Okay, assuming a ground burst, which is worst for local fallout and smashing stuff, you've got roughly 3 zones.
Zone 1.
Ground 0, total vaporization, where the fireball literally touches down. Anything in there, atomized, gone, survival chance, 0. Nada.
Right, Zone 2.
Total destruction zone. Out maybe a mile or 2, depending on the bomb size. Buildings just leveled, completely flattened. The overpressure from that shockwave is immense. Fire is instant.
Still 0 chance, basically.
Pretty much. Maybe if you were in the deepest, most reinforced sub-basement imaginable, maybe. But unlikely.
Okay, Zone 3. This is where it gets interesting.
Zone 3 is severe damage and thermal ignition. Buildings get wrecked, walls down, windows gone, but maybe not totally pancaked. And crucially, the thermal pulse, the heat flash, ignites anything flammable. This stretches out several miles.
And this is the zone where a prepared survivor, maybe in a solid basement, actually has a shot.
Exactly. If you're far enough out to avoid the absolute worst of the blast, but close enough to still be in serious danger, this is where knowledge makes the difference.
Now here's that counterintuitive physics thing we talked about.
Yeah.
The small hope. The fact that light comes before blast. It actually makes nukes slightly less good at starting massive firestorms compared to old school firebombing.
That's right. It sounds weird, but yeah. Think about World War II firebombing raids like Dresden or Tokyo.
What was the technique there?
High explosives first. Blockbusters. Smash the windows, blow open doors, break water mains, basically ventilate the buildings, get air flowing through the wreckage.
Prepare the kindling, essentially.
Exactly. Then they drop the incendiaries, the fire starters, into that prepped mess. Blast first, then fire. That created these massive, uncontrollable inferno.
The nuke flips it.
Right. The thermal flash hits first, ignites whatever is immediately flammable on the surface. Then the blast wave arrives, blows everything around.
Which spreads fire, surely.
It does spread some fire, yeah. Burning debris gets tossed around, but it's less efficient at creating that single, huge, coalescing mass fire compared to the deliberate 1-2 punch of conventional bombing.
So maybe, just maybe, slightly less risk of an immediate, overwhelming citywide firestorm in the Capital Wasteland.
It might slightly reduce that immediate threat, yeah. Doesn't mean no fire, obviously. There'll be massive fires, just maybe not the perfect conditions for an instant firestorm everywhere.
But the risk of a true firestorm, that self-sustaining monster, that's still there, right?
Define that for us. What does it need to really get going? Okay, a true firestorm, like Hamburg saw or Hiroshima, it needs 3 things. Continuous ignition, obviously. Enough fuel packed together, fuel density. And the right kind of building layout.
And it makes its own weather.
That's the terrifying part. The intense heat creates this massive updraft, like a giant chimney, they call it the stack effect. And that sucks in huge amounts of air from all around the edges. Gale force winds, gusting inwards.
So if you're near the edge, you just get pulled in.
Yeah, into the furnace. But here's the weird thing. That same massive inward suction, it often limits how far the firestorm spreads outwards.
Oh.
Because all the air is rushing in, it concentrates the inferno, makes the center unsurvivable, superheated air, no oxygen, those crazy winds, but it can actually stop it from spreading like a normal wildfire.
Okay, so back to our survivor near Fort Bannister or Corvega. Pre-war DC. Looked kind of like a modern city, right? High-rises, concrete. Are we instantly facing a Dresden firestorm?
Probably not. Based on sources looking at FEMA analysis for modern cities, a true self-sustaining firestorm is actually considered unlikely in most modern U.S. city layouts.
Okay, that's actually a relief. Why?
2 main reasons. First, high-rise buildings. They mess up the airflow. They act like baffles, disrupting the smooth inward flow needed for that giant chimney effect.
Okay.
Second, fuel loading.
Modern buildings with steel frames, concrete, fireproofing, they just don't have enough flammable stuff packed together. A firestorm generally needs something like 40 kilos of combustibles per square meter.
Wow.
Most modern construction, way less than that. Now, older cities like Tokyo or Hiroshima back in WWII, with densely packed, flimsy wooden houses, very different story, highly susceptible.
So in the capital wasteland, we'd see huge fires, buildings burning everywhere, chaos, but maybe not that single city-eating fire tornado.
Possibly not that specific phenomenon, yeah. Which is a crucial difference for your immediate survival plan. Still hellish, but maybe survivable in pockets. But, okay, even if we dodge the absolute worst of the fire, the infrastructure is just gone instantly. Let's talk EMP.
The electromagnetic pulse. Another instantaneous punch even before the blast wave hits nearby.
What generates that?
It's the initial gamma rays from the nuke hitting the upper atmosphere. Those gammas knock electrons loose from air molecules. They're called Compton electrons.
Okay.
These electrons then get yanked around really fast by the Earth's magnetic field. And that rapid acceleration creates a massive but very short-lived burst of electromagnetic energy, the EMP.
And what does that do to stuff on the ground, like your phone?
Your phone is toast. It induces huge voltage surges, massive currents in anything long and conductive. Power lines, phone lines, antennas, even pipes sometimes.
So pop goes the grid.
Instantly. Total grid collapse. Transformers explode, power stations fry, anything electronic with complex microchips that isn't specifically hardened against EMP just gets zapped, damaged, or destroyed.
So, lights out. No cell service, no internet, no traffic lights, no elevators. Nothing automated works in the capital wasteland right after the bombs.
Nothing relying on the grid or delicate electronics, no. Water pumps stop, gas lines might lose pressure, telecommunications, all down. For weeks, maybe forever in some places.
Which leads to a really critical survival tip, right? Communication. If everything digital is fried.
Exactly. Mobile networks, internet, local TV, even digital FM radio, probably gone. But
Yeah.
remote AM radio stations have a decent chance of still working.
Old school AM. Why?
Couple of reasons. Simpler tech, first off. AM radio uses analog circuits that are just naturally tougher against EMP surges compared to tiny, complex digital chips.
Okay.
But more importantly, where are those big, powerful AM transmitters often located?
Not usually downtown, right? More out in the sticks.
Right. Remote areas, maybe not even connected to the main city grid. They often use older, hardened, low-tech gear. And crucially, AM signals can bounce off the ionosphere for long distances.
So they can get around localized EMP blackouts.
They have a much better chance. So if you have a working radio battery powered, obviously that can pick up AM, that is your lifeline, your only way to potentially get news, instructions, anything in those first few days.
Wow, okay. That's huge. Find shelter, survive the blast, find a working AM radio. That's the immediate checklist.
Yeah.
All right. Let's say we did it. We found a solid concrete basement, maybe under the ruins of Wheaton Armory nearby. We survived the blast, the heat flash, the EMP zap. Now the threat changes.
Shifts from loud and fast destruction to silent and slow.
The invisible killer. Ionizing radiation. Let's get into the science. What is this stuff? And why are distance and dense materials basically our only buddies now?
Ionizing radiation is scary because you can't see it, smell it, taste it. It's just energy. Subatomic particles or really high energy electromagnetic waves like superpowered X-rays.
And ionizing means?
It means they have enough energy to physically knock electrons off the atoms and molecules in your body, to ionize them.
Which messes up your biology.
Totally scrambles it, damages your DNA, screws up how your cells work, leads to acute radiation sickness or ARS. Nasty, nasty stuff.
Okay, let's break down the types of radiation we're facing. The four horsemen of radiation, right? What are they and what stops them? You had that analogy about throwing things at a wall.
Right, the wall analogy helps visualize it. So first up,
Right.
1, alpha radiation. Think of these as big, slow, heavy particles. They're basically helium nuclei, positively charged.
Big and slow.
Yeah.
So easy to stop, like throwing a balloon.
Exactly. A sheet of paper stops them. Even the dead outer layer of your skin, or just a few inches of air, easy. The danger with alpha is internal. If you breathe in dust, carrying alpha emitters, or eat contaminated food.
Then they're inside, hitting sensitive tissues directly. Lungs, gut.
Right. Massive localized dose. Very bad if inhaled or ingested,
Okay.
but outside the body. Not the main worry.
Okay. Horseman number 2.
2, beta radiation. These are energetic electrons. Smaller, faster than alpha.
Like throwing marbles.
Good one, yeah. Fast marbles, they penetrate more than alpha, but still relatively easy to stop. Decent clothing, a thin sheet of aluminum or plastic,
So they can cause skin burns, but mostly an external hazard again.
Mostly external, yeah. You don't want beta emitters sitting on your skin for long, but they won't go right through you like the next one.
It is.
3, gamma radiation. This is the big one for external dose from fallout. These are high-energy photons, like X-rays, but way more powerful. No charge, no mass. They just zip through stuff.
Cannonballs hitting the wall.
Exactly. Highly penetrating. You need serious density to stop gamma rays. Thick layers of lead, concrete, packed earth, water. That's what it takes. This is the main killer from fallout outside your shelter.
Okay, 3 down, 1 more.
4, neutrons. These are tricky. They're particles like alpha and beta, but they have no electrical charge.
The sneaky ghosts.
Kinda. Because they're neutral, they don't interact easily with electrons, so they penetrate materials really deeply, but they don't ionize stuff directly.
How do they cause damage then?
They slam into the nuclei of atoms, especially light atoms, like hydrogen, which is everywhere in your body, right? Water, organic molecules. When a neutron hits a hydrogen nucleus, which is just a proton, it can knock that proton loose, sending it flying off at high speed. And that fast proton does cause a lot of ionization damage.
Ah, okay, so the neutron itself is indirect damage. It causes other particles to do the harm.
Right, it activates the material it passes through, in a sense.
Now wait, if neutrons interact most with light elements, like hydrogen, does that mean the best shield against neutrons isn't necessarily the densest material, like lead?
Exactly. This blows people's minds sometimes. Lead is fantastic for stopping gamma rays because it's super dense.
Yeah.
But for neutrons, it's kind of useless.
So what do you want for neutrons?
You want stuff rich in hydrogen. Water is great. Paraffin wax, plastics, oils, hydrocarbons. Even concrete works pretty well because it has water chemically bound in it. These light elements are good at slowing down or absorbing neutrons.
So ideally, a good fallout shelter needs a mix. Dense stuff for gamma, hydrogen-rich stuff for neutrons.
That's the ideal, yeah. Layering different materials can be very effective.
Okay, but in the immediate aftermath, that first hour, the biggest, most immediate threat is the fallout raining down, right? Mostly gamma rays.
Overwhelmingly gamma, yes. The fallout itself is the dirt and debris sucked up by the fireball, made intensely radioactive by neutron activation and coated with fission products, then carried downwind.
And it starts falling. When?
Pretty quickly nearby, minutes to hours, depending on the particle size and wind. Heavier stuff falls first, closer to ground zero.
And this is where physics becomes our friend. The saving grace, if you can use it.
The rate of decay. This is maybe the single most important factor for survival if you're in a fallout zone.
Give us those numbers again. They're worth repeating. How fast does this stuff lose its punch?
It's incredibly fast, especially at the beginning. It follows a rough rule of 7, meaning the intensity drops by about 90% for every 7-fold increase in time. But let's focus on the start.
Yeah, the first hour, first day.
In the first hour after the detonation, the radiation dose rate drops by roughly 50%, half gone in just 1 hour.
Wow. Okay. And the first day?
By the end of the first day, 24 hours, the initial intensity has dropped by about 80%.
80% reduction in just 24 hours. That is
Yeah.
huge. So if I survive that first day, hunker down, am I basically out of the woods?
Not entirely out of the woods, no, but the nature of the risk changes dramatically. The immediate, overwhelming external gamma threat plummets.
What?
But the radioactive dust is still there. Even after 24 or 48 hours, there are longer-lived isotopes mixed in. And if you leave your shelter and start breathing that dust, or eating food covered in it, or drinking contaminated water...
You get an internal dose. The emitters are inside you now.
Exactly. And that internal dose can keep damaging you long after the external gamma levels have become much lower. So time is your shield, yes, but only if you spend that time inside proper protection.
Let's put a number on the danger of not sheltering. You said near the crater, 1 hour after the blast.
Yeah.
The dose rate could be.
Estimates are around 30 grays per hour. That's just instantly lethal, basically. A dose of 30 grays would cause immediate incapacitation, death within days.
But if I hide for just that first hour...
That 30 grays per hour drops to maybe 15 grays per hour. Still incredibly dangerous, but half as bad.
And if I hide for the full 24 hours?
It drops down to maybe 6 grays per hour, which is still a lethal dose if you stay exposed, but it shows the power of waiting. Every minute, every hour you spend shielded in those early stages exponentially increases your chance of survival.
So the absolute number one non-negotiable rule for that first hour or day is?
Shelter in place.
Yeah.
Period. Do not try to evacuate. Do not run around outside unless you have confirmed intelligence that your current shelter is about to collapse or is otherwise compromised.
That image we see in movies. People desperately driving out of the city through the chaos.
That's a death sentence in a real Fallout scenario. You're just soaking up a massive dose. Stay put.
Okay, stay put. In the most solid building you can find, you mentioned if we were near Corvega, a concrete factory building. Good blast resistance. Where inside that building do we go?
Deepest and most central place you can find. You want to maximize the distance between you and the outside, especially the roof and walls where the fallout dust will settle.
So middle of the building or basement?
Basement is generally best if it's structurally sound, but remember, even in a basement, the fallout is on the ground above you.
Ah, right. So the radiation shines down through the ceiling and the earth above the basement.
Exactly. So you need shielding above you too, not just around you.
Okay, we need to quantify this protection. You mentioned having thickness. Explain that again. And how much do we really need?
Having thickness is simply the amount of a specific material needed to cut the gamma radiation dose passing through it by half. 50% reduction.
And it varies by material, right?
Hugely. Shows the power of density for gamma rays, for example. Just 1 centimeter of lead cuts the dose by half. It takes about 6 centimeters of concrete, and about 9 centimeters or 3.5 inches of packed earth.
Okay, so lead is amazing, but rare. Earth is common, but you need more of it. And every layer cuts the remaining dose by half again.
Yep, it's exponential. 2 halving layers cut it by 75%, half of a half. 3 layers by 87.5%, and so on.
So for real survival, not just reducing the dose a bit, but getting it down to survivable levels, how many halving thicknesses are we aiming for? What's the target?
The standard recommendation for a good fallout shelter is 10 halving thicknesses.
10. Okay, what does that look like in practice? Using packed earth, how much is that?
10 times 9 centimeters, that's 90 centimeters, or about 36 inches, 3 feet of packed earth, or the equivalent density in other materials surrounding you on all sides, including above.
3 feet of dirt. And what does that do to the radiation dose?
10 halving layers reduces the dose by a factor of 2 to the power of 10, which is about 1,024 times.
So it cuts the incoming radiation down to less than 0.1% of the outside level.
Exactly. That's the difference between getting a lethal dose in hours and potentially surviving for days or weeks until the levels drop further. That 10 halving thickness layer is the goal.
Okay, let's get super practical. Our survivor is in the basement of a ruined office building in DC. No bags of packed earth lying around. No lead sheeting. How do they improvise those 10 halving thicknesses using common stuff? What do they stack up?
Great question. You need mass. Density is key. Inside that basement, you want to build a smaller inner refuge, maybe in a corner away from exterior walls.
Wow.
And you pile up anything dense you can find between you and the outside above. Things like 1, water. Hugely underrated. It's dense, great for gamma and neutrons. Fill bathtubs, sinks, trash cans, any containers. A fridge full of water bottles is a decent shield block.
Right. What else?
2, books and paper. Sounds weird, but stacks of dense paper phone books, office files, textbooks, they actually provide pretty good shielding. Density for gamma, plus the paper has hydrogen for neutrons. Pile them high.
Filing cabinets full of paper. Good. Next.
Canned goods. If you find stored food, full cans or jars, that's dense material, stack them up. Don't eat it yet, use it for shielding first.
Makes sense. Bricks, concrete blocks.
Masonry, yeah, if there's rubble, cinder blocks, bricks, stack those up. If they're hollow, like cinder blocks, fill the cores with dirt, sand, anything dense you can scoop up, every bit helps.
So you're basically building a dense little cave inside the basement using whatever heavy junk you can find.
That's the idea. Improvise that 10 halving thickness shield around a small living space.
Okay, now scenario. Someone was outside, maybe near Fort Constantine, when the bombs hit. They saw the flash, ran like hell, and managed to dive into our shielded basement just as the fallout starts coming down like gritty snow. They're covered in dust. What do they do, like, immediately?
Critical step, decontamination, and it has to happen before they come fully into the main clean area right away.
First step if they were smart outside.
If they had a second, they should have covered their nose and mouth, mask, cloth, anything. And ideally, covered their clothes and shoes with something disposable. Poncho, trash bag, sheet.
Okay, they get to the shelter entrance.
The ritual begins. That outer layer, the poncho, the outer clothes, the shoes comes off outside the main shelter door, or at least in an entryway you can seal off.
Don't bring the dust inside.
Absolutely not. Bag that stuff up if possible, seal it, Leave it outside the protected zone. Then the person needs to clean their exposed skin.
Ow.
Wipe or wash, soap and water if available. Pay close attention to hair, hands, face, neck, any exposed areas. The goal is physically removing the radioactive particles while they are decaying most rapidly.
So doing it sooner is much better than later.
Dramatically better. Early, quick, gross decontamination removes the hottest particles before they decay significantly and give you a big dose. Even just wiping down with damp cloths is way better than doing nothing.
Okay, we've survived the blast, shielded from the worst radiation, cleaned up anyone caught outside. We've bought ourselves time, maybe the first few days, maybe a week in our basement fortress. Now, resources. What are the immediate rules for food and water?
Conservation above all else. Rationing starts now. For water, the guideline is usually at least 2 liters per person per day just for drinking, plus maybe another 2 to 4 liters for hygiene decontamination washes.
Where do we get it? Can we drink tap water?
Initially, yes, probably. Tap water is generally safe right after the event. There's usually a reserve of already treated pressurized water sitting in the pipes under the city.
How much?
Could be a 2 to 3 day supply depending on the system. Use that first, carefully, but after that runs out, or if you're relying on, say, a private well,
Risky.
very risky, well water or water collected from puddles or roofs,
Yeah.
highly likely to be contaminated by surface fallout, needs proper filtering and purification, which might be impossible. Stick to stored water or the initial tap water reserve.
Okay. What about food? Can I pop outside and grab some irradiated Dandy Boy apples?
Definitely not. Avoid any fresh fruits or vegetables grown locally. They'll be covered in fallout. And plants can absorb some isotopes through their roots later, too.
So only stored food.
Only stored long-life food you already have or packaged stuff you might scavenge later very carefully.
If I find like a sealed box of cram or sugar bombs in a ruined grocery store, can I bring that back?
Yes, but decontaminate the outside of the packaging first, wipe it down thoroughly, maybe rinse it if you have water to spare before you bring it into your clean shelter area or open it. Just get any surface dust off. The food inside should be fine.
Got it. Okay, last thing for this immediate survival phase. Iodine tablets. Potassium iodide. Everyone seems to have them in survival kits. Are they the magic bullet against radiation? Do they save us from the bomb?
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. And this is a really important point to clear up.
Okay.
Stable iodine tablets, like potassium iodide, Ki, are not a general anti-radiation pill. They do one specific thing.
Which is?
They protect your thyroid gland, and only your thyroid gland, from absorbing radioactive iodine, specifically iodine-131.
And where does radioactive iodine come from?
Mostly from nuclear reactor accidents, like Chernobyl, or potentially if a nuclear power plant is hit during the bombing. Reactors produce a lot of I-131 gas.
So if the Great War did hit a power plant near DC, then they'd be useful.
Then yes, they could be vital for protecting your thyroid from that specific threat. You take the stable iodine, it floods your thyroid, and there's no room left for the radioactive stuff to be absorbed.
But only the thyroid.
Only the thyroid. They do absolutely nothing against the dozens of other dangerous fission products in fallout. The cesium-137 causing gamma radiation, the strontium-90 that acts like calcium, nothing.
And there's a time limit too.
A very strict one. They work best if taken before exposure or within a few hours after, ideally between 24 hours before and maybe 8 hours after the I-131 arrives. After that, their effectiveness drops off really quickly.
So bottom line, useful for a very specific scenario, reactor accident, only protects one organ and must be taken at the right time, not a general radiation cure.
Exactly. Don't rely on them as your main defense. Your main defenses are time, distance, and shielding. Always. Hashtag tag OUTRO.
Okay, let's try and wrap up part 1 of this deep dive. Where have we gotten?
We've set the stage, I think. Established the Great War wasn't just bad, it was the absolute worst case, driven by resource desperation and fought with dirty, high-yield thermonuclear weapons.
Right, and for you, the potential survivor dropped into that mess. We've figured out how to maybe, just maybe, survive the opening seconds and minutes.
Dodging the instant heat flash, surviving the blast wave by being in a sturdy structure, maybe underground.
And finding or creating a sanctuary with enough mass, those 10 halving thicknesses, to shield you from the immediate lethal gamma rays from the fallout.
Your survival in that first hour, that first day, it hinges entirely on physics, really.
Yeah.
Maximizing your distance from the source, maximizing the density of the shield between you and it, and just waiting, using time, letting that incredibly fast initial decay rate work for you.
That 50% drop in the first hour.
That's the lifesaver if you can use it. Hunker down, follow the decontamination steps if needed. You've bought yourself time. days, maybe a week or more, depending on the specifics.
You've survived the physics, you've got your shelter, maybe even that battery-powered AM radio crackling away. But this is Fallout, right? The grim part is just beginning.
The sources are clear. Those little pockets of survivors, the communities that made it through the bombs, they flared up only to be extinguished by the uncaring wasteland. Surviving the physics was step one. Surviving what comes next.
That's the real test. We survived the cataclysm, but the collapse of everything else. Society, resources, maybe sanity. It's waiting right outside the bunker door.
So when we do step outside, maybe near Fort Bannister, after the worst radiation spike has passed, what hits us first? Is it just the desperate scramble for clean water, for food that won't kill you?
Or is it other people, the other survivors? The ones who are just as desperate, maybe better armed, maybe changed, mutated. What's actually waiting in the ruins?
That's the question, isn't it? The immediate non-radiation threats.
And that, my friends, is exactly where we have to go next time. Stepping out of the shelter into the true capital wasteland. Welcome back to the deep dive. If you were with us for part one, you got the whole grim backstory of the Great War. We walked through the diplomatic failures, the resource wars, Canada becoming Little America, the whole 9 yards leading up to that final world-ending flash.
Right, and that whole geopolitical nightmare, that was just setting the stage. If you, our listener, were somehow unlucky enough to actually survive those first moments, the blast, the searing heat, well, congratulations, you've just landed square one in a world that's fundamentally trying to kill you with physics.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're tackling today. We're shifting gears from the why it happened to the what happens next. This is your emergency broadcast, your survival guide for the immediate aftermath. We're digging into the mechanics, the science, the brutal facts of staying alive when everything's gone radioactive. Think of this like the ultimate in-flight SACE video for your simulated 8-hour trip across this brand new hellscape. We're going super deep, breaking down every single concept so you actually understand the nuts and bolts of it.
That's the plan. We're swapping our sources from State Department cables to, well, civil defense manuals and nuclear physics textbooks. The focus now is immediate, tangible threats. Mass fires, the thermal pulse, the invisible danger of ionizing radiation, fallout, and the absolute must-dos for shelter, food, and water right away.
We want you to stop feeling just overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all and start actually thinking through your odds, like really calculating your chances based on the hard science. We're getting past the lore and into the gritty details of how your first few actions determine everything.
Okay, so let's kick off with the sheer power involved here. The bombs of the Great War, we're talking thermonuclear weapons, fusion bombs, that Teller-Ulam design, right? Where a smaller fission bomb basically acts as a match to light a much, much bigger fusion reaction.
Exactly. It's a huge leap in destructive capability compared to those first atomic bombs. And, when you dig into the history, the casual attitude towards this power is, well, it's something. Take Fat Man, the Nagasaki bomb, the one supposedly named after Sidney Greenstreet in the Maltese Falcon, because it was, like, bulbous.
That's the story, yeah. A weirdly mundane reference for such a devastating weapon.
Bizarre.
But it gets even darker. Our sources point out this detail about the actual Fat Man assembly used at Nagasaki, F-31. It apparently had an acronym stenciled on it, JANCFU.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that's the Joint Army-Navy Civilian FUP.
That's the one, a play on snafu, situation normal, all fed up.
Jesus.
It's, yeah. It shows this weird disconnect, right? These incredibly brilliant people building city killers, but treating the process with this dark, almost juvenile humor, like they compartmentalize the existential risks.
It's nuts. Like they knew intellectually the stakes, but handled it like some bureaucratic screw-up. Okay, but moving past the bomb maker's psychology, the immediate effect people picture is the blast wave, right?
Yeah.
But often further out, the firestorm is the bigger killer.
Yes, and that distinction is absolutely crucial for survival. A firestorm isn't just a really big fire, it's actually a weather system, a self-sustaining convective storm.
How did that work?
Okay, so the intense heat from all the simultaneous fires creates this massive column of rising hot air, right? The stack effect. This updraft is so powerful it starts sucking in cooler air from all sides, creating its own gale force winds blowing inwards towards the center.
Wait, inwards, so it doesn't spread outwards like a normal fire?
Not in the same way, no. The fire essentially creates its own containment system, feeding itself oxygen from the perimeter. Imagine a giant stationary vacuum cleaner, but, made of fire, sucking everything towards the middle. It limits the outward spread, but makes the inside of that zone unbelievably intense, total incineration.
So the danger isn't just fire blowing at you, it's the fire pulling all the oxygen away from you and into itself.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
And we've seen it happen. Hamburg, during World War II, had a firestorm cover about 4.5 square miles. Dresden, even bigger, maybe 8 square miles. Hiroshima's atomic bomb also triggered one, though it was confined by the blast damage area.
But you flagged Tokyo as the exception, right? 16 square miles destroyed by firebombing, but no firestorm. Why not?
Right, Tokyo was different. It was all about the existing weather that day. There were really high surface winds already blowing like 17 to 28 miles per hour. Those strong ground level winds basically overpowered the fire's ability to create its own dominant inward flowing wind system.
Yeah.
So instead of a concentrated, self-sustaining storm, you got a massive wind-driven conflagration that spread more chaotically.
Right.
The weather dictated the fire's behavior, not the fire itself.
So your survival could literally depend on which way the wind was blowing before the bombs hit. Wild. Okay, now for this paradox you mentioned. Conventional firebombing raids being more efficient at starting these mass fires than a nuke. How is that even possible?
It sounds totally backwards, I know, but it's all about the sequence, the order of events. In those big World War II firebombing raids, they dropped the high explosive bombs first. The blockbusters. Their job was to break everything, open shatter windows, blow off roofs, rupture water mains, basically prep the fuel and create airflow.
Right, create the perfect conditions for fire.
Exactly. Then they dropped the incendiaries, the actual fire starters, into all those pre-made openings, optimized for ignition.
Gotcha. Open the fuel tank, then light the match.
Precisely. But a nuclear weapon does it in reverse. You get the intense heat flash first, igniting surfaces instantly, but then milliseconds later, the massive blast wave hits.
And the blast wave can actually blow out the fires that just started.
Often, yes. It disrupts those initial ignitions. So while the overall destruction is immense, the sequence isn't ideal for creating the perfect conditions for a widespread, self-sustaining firestorm compared to that carefully choreographed conventional raid.
That tiny difference in timing, flash then blast, could be a literal lifesaver, depending on where you are.
Wow. And there's one more twist, a modern one. A FEMA report we looked at suggested that modern cities, and you could argue the big pre-war cities in Fallout might be similar in structure, could actually be less prone to firestorms.
Less prone. But they're packed with buildings, fuel.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive again. Two main reasons cited. First, all those tall buildings, the skyscrapers, they create complex wind patterns, turbulence. It's called a baffle effect. It can disrupt the formation of that single, massive, unified column of rising air needed for a true firestorm.
The cityscape itself confuses the fire's weather system.
Kinda, yeah. And second, sometimes the actual amount of flammable stuff per square meter, the fuel loading in modern construction, especially high-rises with lots of concrete and steel, might be below the threshold needed, which is apparently around 40 kilograms per square meter.
So the very density and structure of those doomed pre-war cities might have offered a weird, accidental protection against the absolute worst-case fire scenario. Still destroyed, obviously, but maybe not a perfect firestorm everywhere. What a strange trade-off.
Okay, so let's say you somehow survived the blast and dodged the worst of the fire. Now you face the next big hurdle, the invisible threat. Ionizing radiation. Fallout.
Right, the silent killer. Let's break that down. What is ionizing radiation? Fundamentally, why is it so bad for us?
Basically, it's particles or waves. Think gamma rays, alpha particles, beta particles, neutrons that carry enough energy to knock electrons off atoms they hit. That's what ionizing means. It creates charged particles.
And when that happens inside your body?
Those charged particles become like microscopic cannonballs tearing through your cells. They damage DNA, mess up cell functions, kill cells outright. Your body just can't cope with that level of widespread, random cellular damage. That's what causes acute radiation sickness.
Okay, so survival means knowing what kind of microscopic cannonball is coming at you and how to block it. You mentioned 4 main types.
Yep. Think of it like levels of a video game shield you need. First up, alpha particles.
Big and slow, right?
Relatively speaking, yes. They're basically helium nuclei, quite large on the atomic scale. They don't travel far in air and are easily stopped. A piece of paper, your clothing, even the outer layer of your skin blocks them.
So they're not dangerous from the outside.
Not directly. The real danger with alpha emitters is if you inhale or ingest them, swallow some contaminated dust, breathe it in. Then those particles are releasing all their energy inside your soft tissues. That causes intense localized damage. Bad news.
Okay, level 2 shield, beta particles.
These are energetic electrons. Smaller, faster, more penetrating than alpha. They can get through paper and skin, but you can stop them with denser materials. A thin sheet of metal, like aluminum or even thick plastic, works pretty well.
Got it. Now, the big one for fallout. Gamma rays.
Yeah, these are the main external hazard from fallout. Gamma rays are high-energy photons, pure electromagnetic energy, like superpowered X-rays. They travel incredibly far, incredibly fast, and punch through a lot of stuff.
So what stops them?
Density, lots of it. You need thick layers of really dense material. Lead is the classic example, but also thick concrete, large amounts of water, or packed earth. This is what your fallout shelter has to shield against primarily.
And the last one, the sneaky one, neutrons.
Neutrons are tricky because they have no electric charge. They interact strongly with the nuclei of atoms, especially light ones like hydrogen. So, oddly enough, materials rich in hydrogen like water, concrete, which holds water, plastics, paraffin wax are good neutron shields.
But they also do something else, right? Activation.
Yes, that's the really insidious part. When neutrons hit stable, non-radioactive atoms in materials around the blast, like soil, steel, concrete, they can knock particles around in the nucleus and actually make those materials radioactive themselves. It's called neutron activation. So the ground itself becomes a source of radiation.
Oof. Okay, knowing the types is critical, but where the fallout actually lands is just as important, isn't it? You mentioned burst height.
Absolutely, it makes a huge difference. If the bomb detonates high enough that the fireball doesn't touch the ground, that's an air burst. Most of the radioactive fission products are vaporized into extremely fine particles.
And those just float around.
Pretty much. They get carried up into the stratosphere and spread out globally over months or years. This creates global fallout. A slight long-term increase in background radiation everywhere. Think of it like radioactive glitter scattered across the planet. Annoying, but not immediately lethal.
Okay, but the immediate danger is the other kind.
Right. The surface burst. This is when the fireball does touch the ground. It vaporizes tons and tons of soil, buildings, debris, sucks it all up into the mushroom cloud, and bombards it with neutrons.
Neutron activation on a massive scale.
Exactly. This creates much larger, heavier radioactive particles, local fallout. This stuff is intensely radioactive and falls back to Earth relatively quickly, typically within minutes to hours, concentrated in a plume downwind from ground zero. This is the dirty dump truck of death you have to hide from immediately. More than half of it lands within 24 hours.
Okay, that sounds utterly terrifying. But you mentioned a golden rule, something life-saving about this local fallout.
Yes, and this is probably the single most important piece of information for short-term survival: the decay rate. Local fallout loses its radioactive intensity very quickly.
How quickly?
Listen closely. The radioactivity level drops by 50% in the first hour after the detonation.
Half gone in just 1 hour.
Yes, and it keeps dropping fast. It's down by about 80% within the first 24 hours. This is because most of the radioactivity comes from fission products with very short half-lives. They burn themselves out quickly.
So if you can get into adequate shelter immediately, like within minutes, and stay there, time is actually on your side in a big way. That first hour, first day.
That's crucial. Absolutely crucial. That incredibly rapid decay is what makes sheltering effective. If the radiation stayed high for weeks, survival would be almost impossible. But because it drops so fast, if you can shield yourself effectively for that initial period, your exposure plummets. Generally, after about 3 to 5 weeks, depending on how close you were and the weather patterns, many areas become fairly safe to move through for limited periods, especially for decontamination efforts.
3 to 5 weeks lockdown. That's your initial sentence. Wow. Okay, let's talk about engineering this stuff.
Yep.
You mentioned the Tsar Bomba example. The Soviets actually designed it to be clean.
Relatively clean, yes, for its insane 50 megaton yield. It was a deliberate design choice. Normally, a big part of a hydrogen bomb's yield, and most of its fallout, comes from the fissioning of a tamper layer made of uranium-238 that surrounds the fusion fuel.
Okay.
For the Tsar Bomba, they replaced that uranium tamper with lead. Lead doesn't fission like uranium does. So while they still got a massive fusion explosion, they drastically reduced the amount of fission and therefore the amount of radioactive fallout produced.
They deliberately nerfed the fallout potential. Why?
Well, the thinking is they were testing this thing over their own territory, albeit remote territory. Even they were concerned about the massive radioactive contamination it could cause, potentially drifting back over populated areas or military sites. It shows that fallout was a practical concern, not just a theoretical one, even for the bomb designers. About 97% of the Tsar Bomba's yield came purely from fusion.
Even the Cold War superpowers had limits, apparently. Okay, unavoidable question.
Yeah.
What do these radiation doses actually do to you? Let's quantify the danger.
Yep.
You measure it in grays.
Yep. Grays or Guyot measure the absorbed dose of radiation, and the numbers get scary fast. Right near ground zero, say in the crater area about an hour after a surface burst, the dose rate could be something like 30 grays per hour.
Which is instantly lethal.
Functionally, yes. A dose of 30 gray total is considered acutely incapacitating. Your body starts shutting down almost immediately. You'd be unable to function within minutes or hours. The grim part is, death might not actually occur for maybe 5 or 6 days, assuming no other injuries, but you're effectively dead on your feet.
Okay, what's the threshold? What's the number our listener needs to stay below?
The critical threshold for serious, potentially lethal effects is around 1.5 gray total dose. Below that, you might get sick, but you'll likely recover long term. Above 1.5 gray, you're looking at severe radiation sickness, a high probability of disability, and a significant chance of dying from the effects eventually, even weeks or months later. Staying well below 1.5 gray in those initial weeks is the name of the game.
All right, fallout's coming down, radiation levels are spiking, but dropping fast 50% in that first hour. We know we need to shield ourselves. What's the absolute first thing you do? The mantra.
Easy. Go in, stay in, and tune in. That's the official advice, and it's dead on. Get inside the most substantial building nearby, stay inside, and if possible, tune into any emergency broadcasts for instructions.
And the critical part is staying in, right? No evacuations unless specifically ordered.
Absolutely. Do not try to evacuate on your own, unless you get confirmed instructions from authorities, which, let's be real, might not exist. Leaving shelter is suicide in those first hours or days. You'll walk right into the highest radiation levels, completely undoing any benefit of shelter. Every minute spent outside multiplies your dose.
So that instinct, the panic to get home, get your kids from school,
Yeah.
that's the wrong move.
It's the absolute wrong move, tragically. Civil defense guidelines are very clear. Do not leave shelter to try and retrieve family members.
Yeah.
Children at school, people at work, they should be sheltering in place where they are, following the same rules. Going out to get them puts you in extreme danger and potentially exposes them or others when you return contaminated. It's brutal, but staying put is the only logical move.
Okay, so we're inside. What makes a good shelter? What kind of building? And where inside it?
You need mass, dense materials. So think substantial, permanent buildings, brick, concrete. Forget cars, tents, sheds, light wood frame houses if you have any better option. Basements are generally best.
Right. And within the building?
Deep inside. Get to the core of the building, away from outer walls, windows, and the roof, because that's where fallout will collect and radiation will penetrate most easily.
Now, you mentioned something specific about basements earlier. Not just any spot in the basement.
Yeah, it's a bit counterintuitive. While the basement itself is good because of the surrounding earth, the very center of the basement might actually get more radiation streaming down from the floor above, where fallout has settled on the ground level or roof. The safest spot is usually a corner, ideally one that's below ground level on two sides, maximizing the amount of shielding earth between you and the outside.
Corner pocket, surrounded by dirt. Got it. Okay, let's talk building that shield. The math. Having thickness.
Right. This is the key concept for understanding shielding. Having thickness is simply the amount of a specific material needed to cut the intensity of incoming gamma radiation by half, by 50%.
And what are the numbers we need to know?
For common materials, it takes about 1 centimeter of lead, 6 centimeters, that's about 2.4 inches of concrete, or, and this is the most practical one for improvising, 9 centimeters, about 3.6 inches, of packed earth.
So dirt is pretty good, actually.
Dirt is your best friend in a fallout scenario, yeah. Cheap, available, effective. Now, cutting radiation by half isn't enough if the initial level is lethal. You need to stack those halving thicknesses. The goal is the 10x rule.
Meaning?
You want to aim for a total shield thickness equivalent to 10 halving thicknesses. So for packed earth, that's 10 times 9 centimeters, which is 90 centimeters, or about 36 inches, 3 feet of dirt.
And 10 halvings. That reduces the radiation by how much?
It reduces it by 2 to the power of 10, which is about 124 times. That level of reduction is generally enough to bring even very high initial fallout radiation down to survivable levels within the shelter.
3 feet of packed earth. That's the magic number between living and dying. Okay, how do you improvise that if you're just in a regular basement?
You stack anything dense you can find between you and the outside walls and the ceiling. Books are surprisingly dense. Furniture, bags of sand or soil if you can manage it, filling cinder blocks with dirt, even containers filled with water add shielding mass. The key is maximizing density. And critically, remember, a standard wooden floor above you is not enough shielding. You need mass overhead too, either a concrete floor or, if you're really improvising, piling dirt or furniture on the floor above your corner.
Okay, shield built. Now, keeping yourself alive inside. Water, how much?
Plan for at least 2 liters per person per day just for drinking. But you also need water for hygiene and potential decontamination, so add another 2 to 4 liters per person per day for that. Ideally, you want a week or two's supply stored.
That hygiene water seems crucial if you're stuck in there.
It is. You might need it to wash off contamination, clean surfaces, manage sanitation. Now, the good news, initially, tap water from the municipal system is likely safe for the first couple of days. There's usually a reserve in the pipes and tanks. Drink that first.
But stay away from wells or rainwater.
Absolutely. Avoid private water sources like wells, streams, or collected rainwater, especially early on. They can be easily contaminated by fallout, settling on the ground, or washing into the water source. Stick to sealed, stored water or that initial tap water supply.
Food, what's safe?
Anything that was sealed before the fallout arrived is safe. Canned goods, food in jars, boxes, plastic wrap. The food inside is fine. Just be sure to wipe down the outside of the container before opening it, just in case there's dust on it.
But nothing fresh from outside.
Absolutely nothing grown outside. Don't eat fruits or vegetables from gardens. Don't harvest anything. It will be contaminated both on the surface and potentially internally. You're relying 100% on pre-stocked, sealed food for those first weeks.
Okay, decontamination. If someone has to briefly go outside or got caught outside,
Decontamination needs to happen immediately upon re-entering the shelter, ideally in a designated transition area before they mix with others. It's straightforward. 1. Remove all outer clothing, shoes, hats, put them in a plastic bag, seal it, and keep it isolated. 2. If possible, shower thoroughly with soap and water, paying attention to hair and skin folds. 3. If showering isn't possible, use damp cloths or wipes to meticulously clean all exposed skin. The goal is to remove the radioactive dust particles.
and cause sanitation inside the shelter for weeks.
Yeah, that's a huge, often overlooked problem. You need a plan. Forget flushing toilets if the water's out. You need dedicated containers, heavy-duty buckets with tight-fitting lids, and plastic liners are best. Seal waste immediately. You cannot just toss it outside. That contaminates the area and can draw pests. Strict hygiene inside the shelter is critical to prevent disease outbreaks on top of everything else.
Grim. Okay, last thing in this section. Those iodine pills. Potassium iodide. Do they actually protect you from fallout?
They protect one specific part of your body, the thyroid gland, from one specific type of radioactive isotope radioactive iodine, like iodine-131. That's it.
So it's not a general anti-radiation pill.
Not at all. It works by flooding your thyroid with stable, non-radioactive iodine so it can't absorb the radioactive kind if you inhale or ingest it. It offers zero protection against gamma rays, beta particles, strontium-90, cesium-137, or anything else.
And the timing matters.
Hugely. It's most effective if you take it before exposure, ideally up to 24 hours before or within a couple of hours after exposure starts. After about 24 hours post-exposure, taking it for the first time offers little benefit and might even have risks.
Is radioactive iodine even a big threat from bombs?
It's more of a concern with releases from nuclear reactors that have been running for a while. Weapon fallout contains some, but the immediate overwhelming threat miles from a surface burst is usually the external gamma radiation from other fission products. So while iodine pills might have a place, they're far less important than having adequate physical shielding. Don't rely on them as your primary defense.
Okay, so let's pull back. You've survived the initial onslaught, the fire, the peak fallout. You've spent weeks huddled in your makeshift shelter behind 3 feet of dirt. What kind of world do you step it out into? Let's focus on the Capital Wasteland region from the sources DC, Maryland, Virginia.
Right. You're emerging into a landscape that's basically a graveyard of the old world, but littered with these imposing landmarks. You've got the husks of military bases like Fort Bannister, Fort Constantine, the Wheaton Armory, industrial sites like the Corvega factory, the Nuka-Cola plant. These aren't just ruins, they become focal points. Potential salvage sites, potential dangers, navigation markers in a dead world.
They sound more like hazards than shelters at that point.
Mostly, yeah. And the sources give a pretty bleak assessment of any organized survival attempts right after the bombs. You know, the whole prepper fantasy of militias retreating to the woods to rebuild.
Yeah, didn't work out.
Largely, no. The sources suggest many of these groups, the anti-government types, the private militias who were prepared in a sense, they either got caught in the blast anyway because their rural bunkers weren't truly hardened against nuclear attack, or they just succumbed to the chaos and radiation in the immediate aftermath.
So they prepped for the wrong apocalypse, maybe. More societal collapse than nuclear winter.
You could argue that they might have had guns and ammo, but maybe not the Geiger counters, the decontamination showers, the understanding of halving thicknesses. The sources state that only a few managed to survive those first brutal decades. And here's the key takeaway. Even those who did make it through the initial shock were incapable of effecting change on a larger scale.
Why not? If they survived, why couldn't they start rebuilding, form stable communities?
Because the wasteland itself became the enemy. The sources say small communities would flare up but then get extinguished by the uncaring wasteland. That means it wasn't just other hostile survivors, though that was certainly a factor we'll get into. It was also
The environment fighting back.
exactly lack of medicine for radiation sickness complications or just basic infections. Inability to repair any complex tech they might have salvaged without an industrial base. Mutated creatures, sure,
Yeah.
but also just the sheer difficulty of finding uncontaminated food and water long term. The environment ground them down, depleted their resources, made them vulnerable.
Which ties back to the reason for the war in the first place, doesn't it? The resource wars.
Precisely. The world before the bombs was already running on empty. The Sino-American War had chewed through resources, Canada was stripped bare, timberlands exhausted. They were developing fusion power, things like power armor, but it was too little, too late.
The tech existed, but the infrastructure couldn't support it fast enough.
Right, they couldn't roll out fusion power grids across the country quickly enough to solve the energy crisis before everything collapsed. So the survivors inherited a world that was already depleted, broken, and then got irradiated on top of it all. Large-scale rebuilding in those first years. Almost impossible odds.
Man. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground, from firestorm physics to fallout decay rates. Let's boil down the absolute must-know points for surviving those first critical hours and days. The cliff notes for the apocalypse.
Number 1, know the decay rate. Fallout radiation drops by half in the first hour. Stay put. Time is your ally if you're shielded. Number 2, the 10x shield rule. Aim for 10 halving thicknesses, that's about 3 feet, 90 centimeters of packed earth, to cut gamma radiation down by over 1,000 times. Dirt saves lives.
And number 3, go in, stay in, tune in. Resist the urge to run. Find the best nearby shelter, get deep inside and stay there. Don't go out for anyone or anything unless absolutely forced. Survival is about understanding the physics, the weirdness of firestorms, the inverse square law for radiation, and acting logically, not emotionally. It favors the prepared hermit, basically.
We've laid out how to survive the physical environment, the immediate threats. But we also touched on how those early survivor groups, even the prepared ones, eventually got wiped out by the wasteland.
Right. Which brings us to the terrifying next phase. If the radiation doesn't get you, and the fire doesn't get you, and starvation or disease doesn't get you, what happens when you finally crawl out of your shelter and meet the other survivors?
The immediate environmental threats eventually subside, or at least become manageable. But they're replaced by the long-term human threat. Social breakdown, resource scarcity driving conflict, the rise of factions. That's the enduring challenge of the wasteland.
So surviving the physics is just step 1. Surviving the people, that's the long game. Join us next time for part 3, where we dive into exactly that. The scavengers, the raiders, the emerging societies, and the brutal human dynamics of the post-apocalyptic world.
We'll explore what happens when the laws of physics give way to the laws of the jungle.
It's going to be intense. We'll see you then for the final part of our deep dive into surviving Fallout.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you've been with us for the last 2 parts, well, you know we've been digging into this really grim question. How long would you actually last in the Fallout universe?
It's not exactly uplifting, is it?
Not at all. We've covered the pre-war politics, the resource shortages, basically decades of everything falling apart morally. But today we ditch the history, the sociology.
And get right into the physics, the hard science of the end.
Exactly. This is the moment the bombs fall, the Great War itself, the final exam nobody was ready for.
And this deep dive is really for you, the learner. We're going beyond just the look, the cool, retro-futuristic wasteland vibe.
Which is awesome, don't get me wrong.
Oh, totally. But we're getting into practical stuff, the minute-by-minute mechanics of how it all went down on October 23rd, 2077. What did that actually mean for someone on the ground?
We've got stacks of material here. Seriously, like old FEMA reports from the Cold War, nuclear engineering texts, deep dives into the game lore about the pre-war collapse. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's dense.
Yeah.
Definitely enough for a long flight. Maybe not 8 hours, but...
Yeah, maybe not that long. But our goal today is basically to take all that chaos of the Great War and line it up with the actual science. Nuclear physics, radiation, immediate survival tactics.
We want to give you actionable knowledge, even if that action is like figuring out how many inches of dirt you need between you and, well, oblivion.
It's like the ultimate driver's ed course for when the road itself melts.
Pretty much. Knowing the rules when everything's gone sideways.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're talking about the moment the lights went out, forever. But, before those mushroom clouds even appeared, the world was already kind of broken, wasn't it? It wasn't just, boom, game over.
Oh, far from it. The Great War, it was just the really, really loud ending to a long, slow, miserable slide. The Sino-American War.
Right, that wasn't some big ideological fight, was it? More like fighting over the last scraps.
Exactly. It started over resources, energy, mostly. Then it bogged down into this brutal trench warfare, like in Alaska, until the U.S. rolled out the power armor. That was a game changer.
But the fighting itself got nasty, right? Like, really nasty.
Unbelievably so.
Yeah.
The sources are clear. Atrocities on both sides. Chemical weapons, biological weapons. It just kept escalating. Both China and the U.S. became these totalitarian military states. Honestly, they started looking pretty similar.
Driven by desperation for resources.
Totally. Consuming everything. They were even stripping Canada bare for timber and, crucially, access to that Alaskan pipeline.
Which leads to the whole Canada situation. That wasn't exactly a friendly takeover.
No, not at all. The U.S. leaned hard on Canada for military access to protect the pipeline. It was their last reliable energy source. Canada pushed back. There were riots, sabotage.
Like that pipeline incident.
Exactly. So the U.S. just annexed them. Starting June 2072, call it Little America. The whole pre-war system was just eating itself to keep the war machine going.
It makes the whole thing with the pre-war anti-government groups seem so, I don't know, tragically pointless. You find this in the lore, right? These militias, survivalists.
Oh yeah, they all holed up in remote spots, talking about how they'd take back the government when it all collapsed.
Ready to rise from the ashes.
Except they didn't. Most got vaporized in the first wave because, ironically, they often chose locations near military bases or infrastructure hubs, strategic points.
Prime targets.
Precisely. Or they just died in the immediate chaos afterwards. The whole idea of the tough, independent survivalist rebuilding society.
Hasn't really hold up.
Not at all. The few who survived were scattered, isolated, powerless, really. Their big plans just evaporated. It kind of set the tone for the wasteland. Small groups might pop up, try to make a go of it, but the sheer scale of the disaster just crushes them.
And the official plan? Project Safe House. The vaults. We know from the games Vault-Tec was shady, but was the corruption like a bug or a feature?
It really seems baked in from the start. Project Safe House started way back, 2054, triggered by earlier wars, the New Plague, sold to the public as this huge defense project. Hundreds of shelters. Save America.
Sounds good on paper.
Yeah, but it was a total sham. Because it was classified national security, there was zero oversight. None. So Q, massive fraud, mismanagement, the works.
And how is it funded?
Get this. Junk bonds. High risk, high yield debt. So the very thing meant to save everyone was built on shaky speculative finance, pre-apocalyptic rot, basically.
Yeah.
The system was rigged to fail almost everyone.
Wow. Okay, so moral collapse, financial collapse, then the actual physical one. Let's get to the physics. The bombs start falling. What are we talking about, weapons-wise? Fission bombs.
Yep. The classic implosion-type plutonium bomb, the famous one is Fat Man. And the name itself is actually a clue to how complex this thing is.
Okay, pull that thread. The name's Fat Man, Little Boy. Where did they come from?
It's a neat bit of history actually tied to detective fiction. The earlier, simpler uranium gun-type design was long and thin, so it got called Thin Man after the Dashiell Hammett character.
Ah, okay.
Then the later plutonium design, which was rounder, more complex, got nicknamed Fat Man after Sidney Greenstreet's character in the Maltese Falcon.
No way.
Yep. And then the uranium bomb actually used Little Boy was just named to contrast with the scrapped Thin Man project.
That's wild. Okay, so Fat Man, implosion. How do you make a sphere of plutonium explode with that much force? It's not just hitting it with a hammer.
Definitely not. The core idea is to crush the plutonium sphere, the pit, to twice its normal density. Squeeze it incredibly hard, incredibly fast, and incredibly uniformly. That forces it into a hypercritical state.
Twice the density? How? You can't just wrap explosives around it, can you? The pressure wouldn't be even.
Exactly. That's the genius and the difficulty. You need a perfectly spherical shockwave pushing inwards. They achieve this using something called explosive lenses.
Lenses, like for light.
Kinda same principle, but with shockwaves. Imagine the plutonium pit, the Christie gadget, at the center. Around it is a sphere made of 32 separate blocks of high explosive. Tapered blocks.
32, arranged like a...
Like the panels on a soccer ball? A truncated icosahedron, technically.
Yeah.
Each of these 32 blocks is an explosive lens.
Okay, 32 separate explosions. They all have to go off the exact same instant, right? What if one's late by even a microsecond?
Disaster. Well, not the disaster you want. If the implosion isn't perfectly symmetrical, the core doesn't compress evenly. It gets squeezed unevenly, heats up, and just blows itself apart. It's called a fizzle.
So no mushroom cloud, just a mess.
A radioactive mess, yeah, but not the massive nuclear yield. You lose maybe 99% of the potential energy. So the synchronization has to be perfect. Nanosecond, perfect.
So how do these lenses make 32 outward explosions turn into one perfect inward squeeze?
Each lens is made of layers of different explosives. Some burn fast, some burn slow, shaped precisely. When the detonator fires, the wave travels through the fast layer, then hits the slow layer. The shape of this interface refracts the shock wave, bending it.
Just like a glass lens bends light.
Exactly. It takes the 32 initially convex waves from the detonators and merges them into a single, perfectly spherical concave wavefront moving inwards.
Focusing all that force onto the center. Mind-boggling.
It is. This shockwave then hits a layer called the pusher, usually aluminum, which smooths out any tiny imperfections and transmits the pressure evenly.
Okay.
The pusher then slams into a heavy layer called the tamper, usually made of uranium. The tamper does two things. Its sheer inertia helps hold the core together for a few extra nanoseconds while the reaction builds.
Buys it time.
Right. And it also reflects neutrons that are trying to escape back into the core, which speeds up the chain reaction.
So the plutonium's getting squeezed like crazy. When does the actual chain reaction kick off?
Just as it reaches maximum compression, that double density. Inside the pit, there's a tiny device called the urchin. It's the neutron initiator.
The spark plug.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a small sphere, maybe beryllium coated with polonium-210. Polonium emits alpha particles, but they normally can't get through the beryllium. When the implosion crushes the urchin, the polonium and beryllium mix. Alpha particles hitting beryllium atoms knock neutrons loose. You get this sudden burst of free neutrons right at the moment the plutonium is densest. That kicks off the runaway fission chain reaction. Boom.
An incredibly violent, yet perfectly choreographed dance of physics. Okay, so the bomb goes off. In fallout, everything looks scorched, burnt. We assume nuclear bombs cause instant citywide firestorms. Is that accurate?
It's complicated,
Yeah.
and maybe not as straightforward as you'd think. The bomb gives off intense heat, the thermal flash, then the blast wave follows.
Heat first, then shockwave.
Right. Now, counterintuitively, conventional incendiary bombing raids like the Allies ran on Dresden or Tokyo in World War II were often more effective at creating mass fires and firestorms.
How? How is dropping lots of small firebombs better than one giant nuclear fireball?
It's the order of operations. In those conventional raids, they dropped high explosive blockbuster bombs first.
To break things open.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Break water mains, gas lines, blow roofs off houses, shatter windows, creates rubble, fuel, and critically allows air to flow in. Then they drop the incendiaries into the prepped area.
Ah, so they basically pre-ventilated the fire.
Precisely. The nuclear blast sequence is backwards for fire starting. Thermal flash hits intact buildings, then the blast wave comes and actually blows out many of the initial fires before they can properly merge.
Okay, that makes sense. So maybe not an instant citywide inferno everywhere. What defines a true firestorm?
A true firestorm, like Hiroshima did experience, or Dresden, is characterized by strong hurricane-force winds blowing inwards toward the center of the fire from all directions. It's caused by the immense updraft of superheated air in the middle, the stack effect.
Like a chimney on a colossal scale.
Exactly. But even in Hiroshima, the firestorm was largely contained within the area, already heavily damaged by the blast, because the inrushing air acted like a barrier.
And modern cities, like the ones in Fallout, they're not built like 1940s Japanese cities.
Right. FEMA reports, even looking back from a Cold War perspective, suggest a firestorm is actually unlikely in most modern U.S. cities after a nuclear blast.
Why is that?
Two main reasons. First, tall buildings, skyscrapers, create a baffle effect. They break up the smooth, large-scale wind flow needed for a firestorm to really get going.
Interesting.
Second, modern cities often have less fuel loading per square meter. Less wood, more concrete and steel compared to older cities. You generally need something like 40 kilograms of burnable stuff per square meter to sustain a firestorm, and many modern areas are below that.
So while the Fallout world ends up looking burnt and desolate, the immediate all-consuming firestorm might be less likely than, say, the blast damage and the invisible stuff.
Which brings us right to it, radiation and fallout. But even before the fallout starts coming down, there's another immediate killer, the EMP.
Ah, the electromagnetic pulse. The ultimate party crasher for modern civilization.
Pretty much. It's this massive burst of radio waves generated when the bomb's radiation interacts with the atmosphere. Especially if it's a high-altitude burst, a HEC.
Covers a huge area, right?
Thousands of square miles, potentially. It induces these huge, sudden voltage spikes in anything conductive. Power lines, phone lines, antennas, and anything connected to them.
Frying electronics.
Especially modern solid-state stuff. Microchips are super vulnerable. Your phone, your computer, the internet backbone, the power grid control systems, likely all toast.
What about the older tech in Fallout, the vacuum tubes?
That's a good point. Vacuum tubes themselves are actually much more resistant to the EMP energy itself. They can handle higher voltages.
So the retro tech survives.
The tubes might. But the systems powering them, the transformers, the power supplies, the grid itself, still vulnerable. So even if your tube radio isn't fried directly, the power station feeding it probably is.
So the immediate result for you, the survivor, is darkness. Total blackout.
Yep. No electricity, which means no pump tap water after the reservoir is empty. No refrigeration, so the food supply chain collapses instantly. No cell service, no internet, probably no FM radio.
Your lifeline becomes...
A battery-powered AM radio, maybe? If you're lucky and can pick up a distant station that's still broadcasting. Basic non-digital communication becomes critical.
Okay, EMP knocks out the grid, then comes the fallout. Let's break down radiation for the learner. Alpha, beta, gamma, neutrons. What are they? What stops them?
Right. We're talking ionizing radiation. Tiny particles or waves moving super fast with enough energy to knock electrons off atoms.
Yeah.
That's what causes biological damage.
Let's start easy. Alpha.
Alpha particles, basically helium nuclei. They're relatively big and slow, easily stopped. A sheet of paper, your clothes, even the outer layer of your skin is usually enough.
So, not a threat from outside.
Generally not. The danger is if you inhale or ingest something emitting alpha particles inside your body, they can do serious local damage.
Okay. Next up, beta.
Beta particles, these are just high-energy electrons. They penetrate further than alpha. You need something like an aluminum plate or maybe thick plastic to stop them. Clothing helps a bit, but they can cause nasty skin burns if the exposure is high.
And the big one, the one that gets through walls, gamma.
Gamma rays.
Right.
These are high-energy photons, like X-rays, but more powerful. Pure energy. They don't ionize directly, but they knock electrons loose in materials they pass through. They need serious shielding.
Like,
Dense materials. Lead is the classic, but thick concrete, large amounts of earth, or even lots of waterwork. This is the main external radiation threat from fallout.
and finally, the weird one, neutrons.
Neutrons. No electrical charge. They damage things differently, through direct collisions with atomic nuclei, like microscopic billiard balls. This is called linear energy transfer, or LET.
And they make things radioactive.
Yes, that's neutron activation. When a neutron hits a stable nucleus, it can knock it unstable, making it radioactive. This means your shielding material itself can become a source of secondary radiation.
So how do you shield against neutrons? More lead?
Nope. Counterintuitively, you want light elements. Things with lots of hydrogen are best water, plastic, polyethylene, concrete, which has water in it, even paraffin wax. Hydrogen nuclei are about the same size as neutrons, so they're good at stopping them, like one billiard ball hitting another.
So good shielding needs both dense stuff for gamma and light stuff for neutrons.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
A layered approach is best for a permanent shelter. But for immediate fallout, gamma is the primary external threat you need to block with mass.
Okay, let's talk about the fallout itself, the radioactive dust. You mentioned height of burst is key.
Absolutely critical. An airburst, where the fireball doesn't touch the ground, lofts most radioactive material high into the stratosphere. It spreads globally, decays a lot up there. This causes global fallout, a long-term, low-level increase in background radiation. The bomb pulse they found in milk for decades after testing.
But fallout implies something much worse, much faster.
Right, that's local fallout, from a surface burst or ground burst. The fireball sucks up tons of dirt, debris, building materials.
Yeah.
Makes it all radioactive. These heavier particles fall out relatively quickly, downwind from ground zero.
And this is the really dangerous stuff.
Extremely dangerous, especially in the first hours and days.
But how fast does the danger decrease? That seems vital from knowing how long you have to stay hidden.
It does decrease surprisingly fast. This is the crucial bit. The intensity drops dramatically because most of the radioactivity comes from isotopes with very short half-lives. There's a rule of thumb, the 7.0 rule. For every factor of 7 increase in time after the blast, the radiation dose rate drops by a factor of 10. So after 7 hours, it's down to 10% of the initial rate. After 49 hours, roughly 2 days, it's down to 1%.
Wow, that's a steep drop.
It is. It typically reduces by 50% in the first hour alone and about 80% in the first 24 hours. The bottom line is, most areas contaminated by local fallout become relatively safe for brief travel or decontamination work after about 3 to 5 weeks.
3 to 5 weeks. That's the magic window you need to survive indoors. Seems doable if you're prepared.
It's the critical period. But right near ground zero, forget about it. The levels are instantly lethal. We measure dose in grays. An hour after a surface burst near the crater, you could be looking at 30 grays per hour.
And what does 30 grays do to a person? Let's talk acute radiation syndrome, ARS.
Okay, thresholds. Around 1 gray, you get nausea, vomiting, the hematopoietic syndrome hitting your blood cells. You'll likely survive with medical care.
Manageable, maybe?
Push it to around 10 grays, and you hit the gastrointestinal syndrome. Your gut lining is destroyed. Severe nausea, fluid loss, death is likely within a couple of weeks. Horrible.
And 30 grays.
That's the central nervous system syndrome. Instant incapacitation, disorientation, seizures. You're essentially gone in hours, maybe 5 or 6 days max, regardless of other injuries. It just shuts down your brain.
Grim. Okay, beyond the immediate radiation, what about the long term? Nuclear winter, contaminated food.
Yeah, the nuclear famine hypothesis. Models by scientists like Robach and Toon suggest even a limited nuclear exchange, say 100 bombs the size of Hiroshima's, could throw enough soot into the upper atmosphere to block sunlight significantly.
Nuclear winter.
Or at least a severe nuclear autumn. Global cooling, disrupted rainfall patterns, leading to massive crop failures worldwide. Their models suggest billions could die from the resulting famine, far more than from the blasts or immediate radiation.
Starvation becomes the bigger killer.
Potentially, yes. And then there's the contamination of the food chain from the global fallout that does settle. Long-lived isotopes like strontium-90 and cesium-137 get into the soil, water, plants.
And into us.
Yep. Strontium-90 mimics calcium, goes to your bones. Cesium-137 mimics potassium, goes into your muscles. Eating local produce, meat, drinking milk becomes a long-term hazard from internal radiation exposure. That bomb pulse lasts for generations.
Okay, this is all terrifyingly real. Let's pivot. Survival. You see the flash, blast wave hits or is coming. What do you do right now? What are the absolute must-dos?
Speed is everything, and follow the 3 pillars. Time, distance shielding, TDS. Minimize your time exposed, maximize your distance from the blast fallout, maximize the shielding between you and the radiation.
Where do you go? What's the best immediate shelter?
The most solid, most buried structure you can reach instantly. Basements are good. If you're in a big building, get to the center, lowest floor possible. Away from outside walls, windows, doors, fallout collects on roofs and outside.
What about cars? Tents? Things people might think are shelter.
Death traps. Absolutely insufficient shielding. The sources are emphatic. Vehicles, tents, caravans, flimsy sheds offer almost no protection from gamma radiation. You need mass. Serious mass.
Okay, let's quantify that mass. How much concrete or earth do you actually need to survive those first few weeks?
We talk about having thickness. The amount of material needed to cut the gamma dose by 50%. For concrete, it's about 6 centimeters, maybe 2.4 inches. For packed earth, it's around 9 centimeters, roughly 3.6 inches.
So to be really safe,
You want about 10 halving thicknesses. That reduces the dose by a factor of about 1024. So for packed earth, that's 10 times 3.6 inches. 36 inches, 3 feet of dense earth.
3 feet. Okay, so if I'm in a basement, the earth outside the walls gives me some of that. But what about the ceiling, the floor above?
That's the weak point. Radiation comes from fallout on the roof and ground outside, shining down. The floor joists and floorboards of a typical house offer very little protection. You need shielding above you, too.
So building a little bunker inside the basement.
That's the recommended strategy if you have time or materials. Pick a corner, use the 2 earth-backed walls, build the other 2 walls with something dense cinder blocks filled with sand or soil are good, and pile shielding material on top bags of earth, heavy furniture, anything with mass. Aim for that 3 feet equivalent if you can.
That corner becomes your safe zone for 3 to 5 weeks. Now, the hardest instruction, the really brutal one.
Yeah. Do not evacuate unless specifically told to by functioning authorities, which Good luck with that. But the key thing, if the advice is to shelter, you shelter. Do not leave your shelter to try and find loved ones.
Don't go get the kids from school or your partner from work. That's incredibly difficult to imagine following.
It's brutal, but it's math.
Yeah.
If you go outside during peak fallout, you're absorbing a massive dose. You're also getting covered in radioactive dust. If you make it back, you bring that contamination into the sealed shelter, potentially sickening or killing everyone else inside.
So trying to be a hero could doom everyone.
It likely will. Everyone needs to shelter where they are, following the same rules. Staying put and surviving those first weeks is the most protective act you can do for your family, even if you're separated.
Wow. Okay. What if you were caught outside but made it to shelter?
Decontaminate immediately. At the entrance, before going deep inside. Take off outer clothes, shoes, jacket, hat. Leave them there. Wipe down anything you brought in. And wash yourself exposed skin, hair thoroughly with soap and water if possible. Get the dust off.
Reduces the dose significantly.
Hugely. Especially prevents inhaling or ingesting hot particles.
Food and water in the shelter, what's safe?
Tap water might be okay for a day or two, thanks to water already in the pipes and local tanks. But don't rely on it long term without purification, as pumps will fail. Private wells, rainwater. Very risky without testing.
Assume contamination.
And food. Anything sealed before the event, stored indoors, is fine. Canned goods, sealed packages, just wipe the outside of the container before opening. Absolutely avoid anything harvested locally after the fallout: garden vegetables, fruit. That's how the internal contaminants get you.
Right. Final point. Those iodine tablets. Potassium iodide. Everyone seems to think they're magic anti-radiation pills.
Yeah, a huge and dangerous misconception. Stable iodine tablets do one thing and one thing only. They protect your thyroid gland from absorbing radioactive iodine.
Which is mostly released from...
Nuclear reactor accidents, like Chernobyl. It released a lot of radioactive iodine, leading to thyroid cancer spikes, especially in kids. The tablets work by flooding your thyroid with safe iodine, so it can't take up the radioactive kind.
So pretty irrelevant if the attack is just bombs not hitting reactors.
Largely, yes. If a bomb hits a power plant, then yes, they're vital, and you need to take them fast, ideally just before or within a couple of hours after exposure starts. But against the gamma rays from fallout, against strontium-90, cesium-137, neutrons, they do absolutely nothing.
And popping iodized table salt won't cut it.
Not even close. You need the specific high-dose potassium iodide tablets. Taking salt is useless and potentially harmful, so iodine. Very specific use case, not a general radiation shield.
Got it. Okay, so we've gone from the world falling apart before the war, through the insane precision of the bombs, the physics of the blast and fallout, and the cold, hard rules of sheltering. What's the final takeaway on surviving Fallout's Day Zero?
The world of Fallout didn't just vanish in a flash. It was a long time coming. The pre-war power is basically self-destructed. The bombs themselves were marvels of applied physics, incredibly complex. But your survival, paradoxically, comes down to simple, brutal basics. Get underground, get behind mass, and wait. 3 to 5 weeks. It's not about fighting monsters yet. It's about respecting the invisible killer radiation and playing by its rules. It's about that 36 inches of dirt.
It's wild to think about the sheer technical brilliance needed for the bombs, set against the background chaos of war and, well, human nature.
Oh, completely. The Manhattan Project itself was famously chaotic, and it seems that continued. You know the plane that dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki? B-29, number F-31. They had an acronym stenciled on its nose.
No, yeah. What was it? Sounds like dark military humor.
Totally. It was JNCFU.
JNCFU, meaning?
Joint Army-Navy Civilian Fuck-Up. A play on the classic military term snafu situation normal. All fucked up. It kind of perfectly captures it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even at the peak of technological power, it's still underpinned by human messiness and potential failure. Perfect setup for the wasteland, really.
Wow. JNCFU. So the lesson is even the most complex science happens amidst chaos, setting the stage for, well, more chaos. Which brings us to a final thought, I suppose. Scientists and militaries try to control every aspect of these weapons, every protocol, but there's always that element of the uncontrollable, isn't there?
There really is. General George Lee Butler, he used to run the U.S. Strategic Air Command, the bombers and missiles. He reflected on how we got through the Cold War without annihilating ourselves. He said it was down to some combination of skill, luck, and divine intervention.
Really?
And I suspect the latter in greatest proportion.
Skill, luck, and divine intervention. Maybe in the Fallout universe, on October 23rd, 2077, they just finally ran out of luck. Or maybe the divine intervention just wasn't there that day, leaving just the physics, the fallout, and whoever was smart or lucky enough to find 3 feet of dirt.
It's something to think about next time you're packing your bug-out bag. Or maybe just reinforcing the basement.
Indeed. That's a wrap on this deep dive series. Thanks for sticking with us through the grim realities of surviving the apocalypse.